And I'm live right now on YouTube. Yeah. Welcome, YouTubers, or those who just, watch on YouTube. Happy Tuesday. Today, we're going to be talking about, again, referencing the last podcast that was actually published on Tuesday, March 25th, about adding additional revenue streams to your shop. Uh, this particular live stream is going to be talking a little bit more about storage and rentals and how to kind of leverage what you have. And one of the things that we talked about was not only what are your customers saying, but what do you have in front of you that you can actually leverage what's in front of you to try to add to the revenue streams. And so welcome back, everyone. And again, as you already know, I'm Brad Hurlock, and this is all about the Garage Grit podcast. And the goal for these live episodes is to encourage conversation on the Facebook Live group so that we can talk a little bit more about the podcast. When you listened to episode 16, what were your thoughts? Did you think about, hey, they didn't talk about this, this, and this? By all means, add it here. Let's start that conversation. All right. And so if you haven't already listened to that podcast, hop out to Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts and take a quick listen and hear what Bill and Tyson had to say about alternate revenue streams for your shop. So the goal isn't to flip your business completely on its head. The goal is to see what we can do to augment what you're already doing. And the goal is to try to just add a little bit of gravy or icing to what you're already doing. So we're not trying to flip your whole business model. And so you got to be careful to, not end up, after like shiny object syndrome and running down the wrong path. But again, what do you have? A lot of places, a lot of shops, they're fighting for parking spaces and they already have a completely full lot. But occasionally we come across, or actually more than occasionally, we come across shops that actually have space out back or inside or warehousing space where they can actually set up additional storage and rental type services. And so I'm not trying to talk about switching you up into a U-Haul location, but I am talking about trying to find ways to, again, augment what you're already doing. Imagine if in your region, changing the tires for on a car for season changes is a thing, and you have the space. And imagine yourself actually renting that space out so that they don't have to store their tires at their home or apartment or on their back porch. They can actually store them with you. And for a small fee, you've got them coming back in the spring or coming back in the winter to get their tires put on and their wheels aligned. And so that's an easy way to, again, add a little bit more, take use of your space. But what other things like that can we be talking about when it comes to, storage? Maybe you have even more area than that. Maybe you could potentially allow for seasonal storage of classic cars, convertibles, or motorcycles. Or maybe they're just going out of town for a few months. Who knows? I can't even fathom the idea of going on vacation for a few months, but people do it, right? And so let's and hopefully they're your customers, and so talk about using that space. Now we're going to talk a little bit later about some of the FYIs or just kind of watch out for insurance type things, because once you have their property on your lot, on your space, you need to make sure that it's properly insured, right? So keep that in mind. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what about other car related equipment, maybe from the industrial side or from the commercial side, like plows or those types of seasonal type of industrial equipment? Again, how do we leverage the space that you have to bring in a little bit more revenue that might be actually related to what you're already doing? Again, I don't recommend going too far off the beaten path, but the idea of tire storage, especially in the Northeast, obviously, it's an opportunity for you to handle that seasonal change for your customers. I mean, if you're already swapping the tires, why not store them too, right? Um, is anybody doing these types of things? And if so, what is your rate? And do you have indoor versus outdoor storage? And what's included in that storage? Um, I'd be interested in hearing how different markets and different regions are doing these types of different things. So, by all means, feel free to jump into the chat and comment and just have open conversations. Again, the goal of the Garage Grit podcast, the goal of even AA Shop marketing, and the goal of this forum is to help as many shops as we can. So if you want to give back to your industry by actually helping out, I encourage you to comment and again, see what other people are doing and see how you can actually improve your situation while helping others to improve theirs. Um, Next, I want to dive into vehicle rentals, and I'm going to also refer you not just to this most recent podcast, but also to the one that was published in late December of 2024 because in that particular episode, we went in greater detail on shuttle services versus Uber lifts versus rental services. And so this one is considerably more involved. But if you've got a spare car that's just sitting around, or even an old loaner vehicle that still runs decent, maybe it could be a profit center. And I say maybe because you don't want to be too casual about it. You need to get all of your T's and Q's or I's dotted, whatever the expression is, on all of those details from legalities to liability. But the reality is, if you're going to be waiting on parts and you've got that extra car on your lot, wouldn't it be nice to have that extra space by giving it away to somebody who can use it as a loaner while they're waiting 3 or 4 days for the part to come in, or if the repair is going to take longer than just one day? Having that multi-day loaner car rental setup could be a little extra cash for the business, but just as important, if not more space on your lot for other repairs that need to be done to other vehicles. But maybe that's too far out there for you. Maybe you need to do a baby step towards that, or even just stick to having a loose partnership or some sort of agreement with a local rental company, or even a local set of Uber and Lyft drivers that you can refer to. I've even heard of some shops doing corporate accounts with Uber. And a lot of them do it from a concierge basis. But the question becomes, is there an opportunity here for a revenue standpoint? Now, we all seen the courtesy cars for the dealerships, and I know that we're always talking about being dealership alternatives. And so, we need to make sure that we're not trying to get $10 and meanwhile hurting ourselves in the process. So you need to be kind of weary on that. But again, a multi-day service requirement, or a situation where the customer just really needs their car for that day and it's going to be in your shop all day, a loaner car makes a lot of sense, as opposed to just a single, one spot, one drop, or one location to the next location. But it's an all-day thing. The loaner car is a potentially no-brainer for them. And you don't need a full fleet to do that. You could just be talking about a handful or even two, or maybe one of insurable vehicles, and make sure that you have a process in place to protect yourself. And in some markets, you might only be talking about $30 to $45 per day. In other markets, you're going to be talking about closer to $100 a day. And so, again, I'm opening this up. I'd love to hear from everybody on who has tried this, what went wrong, what went well, and did you actually first find out what your market was going to bear when it came to the price of a loaner car? And then also, did you compare the level of comfort of your loaner car compared to? And so there are liability issues with this. And again, we're going to circle back to that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk to you about another obvious alternate revenue stream. And a lot of times, auto repair shops do this early on, as they're in the beginning part of their business, where they're just trying to get some cash in the door to help pay for some of the expenses of starting a repair shop, selling used cars, flipping cars, repairing them, and then getting them ready, and then getting them sold. And what's interesting about that is, sometimes when they have their shop up and running and sustainable and they've got enough maintenance oriented customers, they don't keep doing that, right? And which is kind of a surprise because it gave them extra cash. So why not keep it going? Now, as we pointed out in the last episode, you need to be aware of your local and state regulations with regard to selling cars, how many you're allowed to sell versus before you're considered an actual used car lot. And maybe becoming a used car lot is where you want to go with it. But find that out for yourself, figure out what's best. And if you're already doing that, I'm very curious to hear from you. Uh, how are you marketing it? Is it just to your existing customer base? Are you on a main street and so it's just got the sign out front? Or are you also marketing it digitally? And if so, where are you marketing it digitally? Are you talking about Craigslist or are you talking about something a little bit more formal? Are you talking about Facebook Marketplace? Or are you actually going to Auto Trader? How are you letting people know about that car? Um, and so, it's interesting. I'm assuming that you've fixed up that car adequately. So I'm hopeful that you did, that you would trust even one of your existing customers to get into that car. And what's nice about that, in my perspective, is you can really relay, what's going on with that car. Um, but there's also the downside is, when you buy a used car, there will be future maintenance issues with it, and that could also kind of bite you from behind on that. So I'd be curious to hear some stories in regards to that. Um, maybe you don't want to sell it to your existing customer base, or do you? Let me know. Let me know what's going on. Let me know what you're doing. Um, it's an interesting concept and consideration, because you kind of want to build that trust, but if something goes wrong, you may have wrecked that trust with that customer. Um, Used cars are sometimes unpredictable. All right, moving on to the next segment of this live stream. I want to talk a little bit about the legal and logistics side of things. I'm not an insurance guy. I'm not a lawyer, but these are things and areas that you need to be thinking about when you're exploring all of these, even when it came to the storage. God forbid something happens from a weather event that actually causes damage to some of the things that are stored. Your customer is going to expect something that's going to help them be made whole, right? So talk to your insurance provider and see what the rules are. Sometimes the name of the game is to start a separate LLC, and sometimes not. And so now you're also bringing in your accountant into the equation. You're going to need to have written agreements in place. I'm sure there are templates out there that you can kind of adopt and adjust. But again, I would seek a professional to make sure that you're, in the right vein, in the right line, making sure that you've got all your ducks in a row. And absolutely check with your municipalities, state and local, to make sure that there aren't rules around, or there will be rules around what you can and can't do, and that you're complying with those things. But don't let those things scare you, because as for now, it's just a simple phone call or Google search for you to kind of get some of the information and start exploring it, see what's available to you, and then go from there. Okay, let's recap. If you've got unused space, then storage is a possible low effort, steady cash opportunity. If you have extra vehicles, then rentals could be again a small but solid opportunity, and also elevates your concierge game with your customers. And again, both will require some setup. Both of them will require some of the research, but it's available to you. So you got to do a how soon can I make it back type question. What are you guys doing? What are these two things or three things are you guys doing currently? What have you tried? What didn't work? What did work? And if it worked out well, did you just get lucky? Or did you have everything lined up the way you should, and you're confident to be able to keep that model going as an additional revenue stream on top of your repair shop? And how does it, if at all, make your customers stickier to you? Because that's also the part of the name of the game. Um, and if you have an extra service and nobody knows about it, meaning you haven't done any marketing to promote it, do you actually have an extra service? I mean, it's kind of like the whole if a tree falls in the forest and nobody is there to hear it, right? So you've got to always thinking about how you're going to be coming to market with these things. How are you going to present them, and how you're going to do it in a way that's not going to distract from your primary source of business, your primary business of auto repair. All right. So again, go check out the full podcast episode. If you haven't already, it's Beyond Repairs, How to Boost Revenue with Smart Add-ons. It's episode 16, published on March 25th of 2025. It's on Spotify. It's on Apple Podcasts. It's on YouTube. It's pretty much on all the platforms. Next week's stream, we're going to be diving into detailing and appearance services, as well as a little bit on ADOS. Again, all three potential optional revenue streams, potentially some strong upsells, but some strong margins, but also some strong barriers depending on the situation. So feel free to tune in next Tuesday. And I appreciate that you're listening to this particular recording. Let's keep it going, and I'll see you next week.